Hello, my name is Ortez, and welcome to Insure Your Success podcast. And today we got a very special guest. This woman is resilient. She's a wife. She's a mother of four. She's inspires people. She's a coach. She's a motivational speaker. She's an author. She's an excellent cook. And I like to introduce everyone to my beautiful wife, Naima. Naima, welcome. Or sweetheart, I should say, welcome to Insure Your Success podcast.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ortez. Thank you so much for allowing for me to come on the podcast. I know that this is a startup for the season 2, and so me being one of the first guests is super important to me. So I appreciate that. And so as we're moving forward, of course, we want to make sure that we're ensuring people's success. So I'm excited that you've invited me to be a part of that.
Excellent. So tell the people a little bit about yourself, where you at, what type of business that you do, where can they find you at? Give us a little info on you.
So my name is Naima Abdullah. I am a life and business coach. I empower Muslim women and women of color to overcome their mental and emotional barriers, to manage their internal saboteurs, and to use business strategy to level up every aspect of their life. So I know some people probably are asking, well, what is a saboteur? Well, saboteurs are behavior patterns that you have developed as a young person that basically do exactly what it says. It sabotages your entire life. And how you do one thing is how you do everything. So, understanding what those saboteurs are doing, why they're doing it, and being able to move into Sage is super important in order for you to have the elevated life that you deserve.
That's an excellent introduction. I'm gonna have to get you the right mind.
Okay.
Excellent introduction there. So let's talk a little bit. Let's go back a little bit. Give us tell us about your earlier stages in your life. You talk a lot about saboteurs, and by me being privileged to hear a lot of your coaching calls, a lot of these saboteurs are developed in our childhood years.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your dynamics, where you're from, how you grew up. Give us a little bit background about that.
Okay, a little bit of background is I was born in Las Cruces, New Mexico. 3 of us were. And so my younger brother, Bashir, was actually born in Texas. But when we were in Las Cruces, as young people, my dad had us, we were Muslim when we were younger. So he introduced us to Islam as young people. And then every fourth Sunday from Las Cruces, we would go to El Paso to listen to the fourth Sunday address, which was the lesson that Imam W.D. Muhammad would give on fourth Sunday. And through that experience, Imam Wazir, his family was the family that we would drive to their home. And Sister Karima Norris was also here in Atlanta. So, yeah, there was 10 children is what I remember that we're going to see the 10 kids, so we would drive every Sunday. And a part of what my dad instilled in us was virtues, values were super important to him. Community life was super important to him. And maintaining family structure was important to him. And it was a little bit of a dichotomy, though, because he, at the age of 18, was basically sent to the Vietnam War, which took a toll on him when he came back. And so when he came back, his mental stability began to deteriorate. And some of the things that he and we began to experience were, some trauma. And unfortunately, my dad, like many African American men and men who experienced the war at an early age when they came back, they didn't have the support for mental health. They didn't have the support financially, and they didn't have the support of their community that they were around when they were in Vietnam War. So they came back to families that were disassociated with understanding what war really meant for young people. So when you're 18 years old and you're asked to go and kill people for what reason, you have no idea. And then when you come back, you have to live that experience through people who may not have been through that trauma. So his trauma then became to be our trauma. So as our young people, as young people. So I often remember sometimes my dad would ask us to, um, use the bathroom in the dark because it made him feel safe. And I was like, we're little kids, like we can't use the bathroom in the dark. But he whatever he experienced in his mind from memory of the war, he began to take out on us, especially my mother. So unfortunately, my father was abusive to my mother for several years, and at some point he decided he was no longer wanting to be in Las Cruces, which he had made a lot of strides. He was like the first African American male to do a lot of things in Las Cruces, but he still was very, very worn of that. So we decided to basically pack us up and move to Texas. And of course, as a young person, you don't understand the decisions that your parents make, but you roll with it because you don't really have a choice. And so when we moved to Texas, became familiar with the Dallas Masjid of Al Islam. And at the time, during the 70s and 80s, I believe it was the standard that any masjid that was in association with Imam W. Muhammad, it was like the name, and then it was of Al Islam. So just like we're in Atlanta Masjid of Al Islam. So it was Dallas Masjid of Al
Shout out
Islam.
to Atlanta Masjid of
Okay.
Al Islam. Shout out, shout out. That's our
Right.
home
So,
masjid.
yeah, Dallas Masjid of Al
Yeah.
Islam. And so that's kind of like where a lot of the foundation of me being a Muslim came from. And yeah, and a lot of different things started happening once we moved to Texas.
So you get to Dallas, Texas, and of course, as you got into adulthood, you got married to your ex-spouse
Mhm.
and had kids. So what was that experience like, and how did that change you, especially because you had four beautiful sons? But how did that experience shape and mold you?
Well, I think that what happens is when you're a child in an abusive household, you don't really realize the impact of it until you start to have children. So, one of the things that I learned, because behavior is of course learned, is that even if it's negative, behavior is still learned. So I learned that what I thought love was someone, um kind of the makeup portion of the abuse. Like it's okay to abuse people, but if you say you're sorry and then we can make up, it's okay. But um so when I was married to my first husband, what I realized is that I would sometimes prompt him to do, or to get angry or to be frustrated with me because I thought that that was a signal of love. And he literally had to tell me, I'm not gonna hit you. Like, I'm not gonna, like, you have to stop doing this, right? This was early in our marriage. And I was like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize that I was doing that. And so immediately I stopped doing that type of behavior. And I was like, okay, that's when I started realizing that the fundamentals of love and understanding what love was it was like, okay, yeah, love is not abuse. And so having to demystify that in my head and in my mind, and then really understanding what love was from a perspective of a young parent, and then instilling that in my children. So that was important to me in terms of like making them responsible. Some of the things that our dad taught us was values, and making sure that they clean their room and making sure that they ate well. And we were always on a schedule when they were younger. But as life has it, things happen. And so I had made a decision. Well, when I was younger, I basically struggled because I had low self-esteem. And because I had low self-esteem, I often let other people run over me. I often let people take advantage of me. I was a people pleaser, and those are some saboteurs that still exist now, but I'm able to manage them now. So, people pleasing became a way for me to feel like I was loved, but then I developed resentment. So that's what people pleasers do. They want to please other people, but then they develop resentment. And that's a saboteur, right? Hypervigilance, always waiting for the shoe to drop. What's the next bad thing that's going to happen? Because that's what I grew up with, seeing bad things happen. My dad abusing my mom every single day. You know how some people say every day, and it's kind of like not really every day, but no, this was every day, unfortunately. And it just started to wear on me. So my thought process began to turn into, man, things are not going to be, well, when things are good, then the bad's going to happen. So I became extremely hyper vigilant. And then I became a victim. I became a victim thinking that everything that happened to me was because of what's on the outside, not realizing that I had to have my own strength within myself in order to get past whatever experiences I was having. And so I had to learn that and still be a parent. And, when you as a young parent are developing within your own self, then you'll start to begin to see how your children are learning your in your deficiencies, right? And so yeah, they're super in tune to, what community means, what it means to work, what it means to, but then they're also attuned to dysfunction because they lived in two separate households. When I got a divorce, I had the children for a week and then he would have the children for a week. And the adults want to see the children, but they're not realizing that that creates dysfunction in children. So that was, you know, I'm developing saboteurs, they're developing saboteurs. So what happens is you begin to the learned behavior that you have, you pass it on because that's the only thing that you know until you are conscious about how to make a change and how to hold yourself accountable for the things that you decided to do.
Okay. Okay. So you went through this change of you talked about, getting divorced, kids being with you 1 week, and the kids being with him 1 week. And during that time you had another change. You got married to me.
Yes. I did.
And at the time, kids were still young. You were still working at the masjid and stuff like that. I was an entrepreneur at that time. And of course, when we got married, things was, going good. And I went through some rough patches financially. And that's the challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs, when either, one may be an entrepreneur and you're used to him bringing in some money and sometimes that money stop all of a sudden because, you just, as a man, we trying to grind it out. As an entrepreneur, you're trying to grind it out, figure it out. Or it could be a female. Sometimes it's the female with the entrepreneur and the man may be still working. And sometimes those dynamics just don't fit in well, right? Because you have one that may have a job mentality, one have an entrepreneurship mentality, but the reality of it is these bills still coming in, right? So share with the audience here about that dynamic because you're coming out of a situation, you get remarried, you marrying this gentleman who has this big ambition about owning and starting his own business. At the time, I was an entrepreneur. When you got with me, things was going well. Then I had a little shift. So explain to me how
In the audience.
and the audience
I love it.
how
This is the juicy part. This is really therapy.
how
right
you
now.
yes it's therapy. How how that played a part.
Well, I will say this: when number one, a woman has to be clear on what she wants. That's the first thing. So one of the things that attracted me to you was because you were an entrepreneur, because you um, dressed a certain way. I talked about that all the time. Because you played the part. Because I could see that you did have ambition, that you did have goals, that you had a mindset of, man, I want to be this, and I'm going to be at all costs. Right. So that attracted me to you. So I was super excited about that. But one of the things that was totally different was I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. So I hadn't worked before. So toward the end of my first marriage, I then had to go into the workforce. For someone who had never worked before, The benefit of it was that I worked in my community. So, I was working at the masjid, which really was a protection. It really, some people might say it really wasn't a real job, but it absolutely was a real job in so much that I had to do a lot of social services with people and help people with all of their needs and, keep the community flowing. And, I had administrative tasks because I did those at home. One of the benefits was also that I became the assistant treasurer at the masjid because they used QuickBooks, but QuickBooks was formerly Microsoft Money, which I used at home to manage the books at the home. And so when they keep talking about, stay-at-home moms, they got some arsenals, right? They can do everything. They can be the CFO, they can be the chef, they can be the decorator and all these different things. So I had a lot of skill sets, even though I was a stay-at-home mom. And one of the things that we also used to do was we used to do a lot of conferences. And so had all of these various skill sets. And so then it was like, oh, okay. Oh, now I'm about to marry a business minded man. So maybe I can use these assets in that way. And one of the funny things is that, as you know, it didn't work well. It didn't work well with us because how one person perceives an action to go and another person perceives an action to go, sometimes two people might butt heads. But it's really about when entrepreneurial spouses want to work together, the balance has to be that one person really lets that person do that specific role without taking control. And when there's a struggle for control, that's how come sometimes people can't work together. But what we found is that sometimes it's better for us to work in our own lane, right? And so you working in your lane, and then being a stay-at-home mom for 10 years and then working at the masjid for 10 years and then me branching out on my own and developing my own business and then becoming an entrepreneur. So I've been an entrepreneur now for over 15 years. And so I just knew that I had the skill set. And I went back to school in 2012 and was it 2012 around that time, and ended up graduating and getting my associate's degree. But because I had, my dad had kind of like instilled in us knowledge, and I read so many books and I, listened to so many different podcasts, and just in absorbing all of these different things, magazines, like, I used to read a lot of magazines when the children were younger and learned all of these different skill sets again at home and using it as experience. Then I knew as a business person, I can do anything.
You can do anything.
I can do anything, right? So that was important.
Yes. So one of the things that I see that you do so well, you have, you balance being an entrepreneur. So let's talk about that. Still got to be a wife.
Mm-hmm.
Still gotta, cook because I like to eat.
Yeah.
And both of us we do share in that because if you know me, I like to cook too as well.
Yeah.
But still gotta cook, still gotta deal with kids, and now of course with the addition of the grandbaby.
Mm-hmm.
So still being involved, active in the community. How do you balance and juggle all that? Because all those different entities require a lot of energy and attention in themselves.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that? Because sometimes that could be a challenge. Yes, I'm an entrepreneur, and sometimes that could have an effect on a relationship because now you're trying to get your business going, and so now you may not spend as much time with your husband, may not have much time for the kids no more like you used to. You're just trying to balance all those things. So how do you balance all those things to kind of keep everything afloat and at the same time keeping yourself happy and still trying to take care of all the obligations that you have to take care of?
Yeah. So, what I like to tell, when I ask women, hey, do you have a business? Most women say, I don't have a business. And I say, you absolutely have a business. Your life is your business. And so, one thing that was instilled in me when I was young is, my parents, they always taught us about cleanliness, keeping the house clean. So, we had to keep the house clean at all times.
Okay.
Never could the house not be clean, right?
Right.
My mom, when I was 7 years old, she taught me how to cook. And so, eating fresh and healthy meals every single day was instilled in me as a young person. And I'm saying, how do I balance it now? I had to learn it when I was younger. So you can't be the person in the future if you're not doing it right now. So who do you want to be in the future? So this is the same thing about parenting. Who do you want your children to be in the future? So one of the things that I instilled even in my children is that the idea and concept of who do you want to be, not who I want you to be, right? And so it's super important, number one, to put yourself first, right? It doesn't sound like it's normal, but it is normal. It's normal to put yourself first, because when you put yourself first and you find that you're happy and you're able to do the things you want to do, the people around you will feel that energy and that sense of y how you are defined as a person. You're feeling, oh yeah, I am so happy to be who I am. Then the people around you begin to feel that. And then they also begin to make room and space for themselves individually. And then they find balance in their own life, just like you found balance in your life after we were married, you know? But then organization is everything. So going back to your life is a business. What is your SOPs? What are your standard operating processes for your life? And so what I tell women is, when you see chaos in your life, it has nothing to do with life. It has to do with your standard operating processes. And what are those? Do you keep your house clean regularly? Because children can't function in messy spaces, right? I know that we have this whole movement of, oh, do what you want and let your kids be whatever, and it's okay if the house isn't clean. Absolutely not. Because when a child sees mess, automatically their brain is stimulated, overstimulated, and so their behavior begins to become a reflection of that. So if you don't want your children to be frantic, make sure your house is clean, right? Cooking. Do you want to spend a lot of money going out to eat? You can, but most women, if you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a single mother, it becomes very difficult to cook meals on a regular basis. But organization is what's going to get you there. So if I have I did a menu for the month. Once I would When I was 17, I started doing the menu for the month. As you know, I'm over 50 now and I'm still doing menu for the month. What do? We eat Mexican on Wednesdays and Italian on Tuesdays and American on Monday. So like, being organized is half of the battle. So organization is going to get you the balance that you need in your life. You can't say that I'm going to do this, that, and the other if you're not organized. And so then you start thinking about schedule. How do you organize schedules? What is important to you, you'll do. And so you can't say you want to be in a relationship if you're not putting the relationship on the schedule, right? So it's important. Something that we even had to learn how to do, right? How can we spend time together even though we work all these weeks? You know, can we make sure that Friday we go out to eat, or make sure that Friday we eat something together, or, you know, we have date night and things like that. But it's important to make sure that we put these things on the schedule, because again, your children are still watching you even as adults. So what you do, they're going to do. So when you start thinking about, are the SOPs of my life functioning in a way that's also teaching? So you're doing teaching and learning at the same time. So when you start thinking of, what did my children see and how are they going to be as an adult, you'll begin to see it as they get older, how well your SOPs work. Because as everybody knows, what you put in, you will always get out. So when whatever whatever it is that comes out is as a result of what you put in. So when people are like, man, this is so messed up, then change your SOPs. Change your standard operating processes.
That's right.
In order to have the life that you want, the process that you want, and the results that you want. So if you're not getting the results that you want, go back to the basics.
Okay. All right. Great information. So both of us are currently entrepreneurs right now. And you know, I tell people all the time, you know, my office is in the basement. Of course, we have a virtual office right here that we record this podcast at. But, you know, I often tell people, I say, man, I'm in the basement and my wife is in her office upstairs. And when I go down there, sometimes I may not see her for the whole day, even though we're in the same house. And, you know, we work a lot, we grind a lot. You know, she has her things she's doing, I have my thing that I'm doing. But when you have two entrepreneurs in a house that's grinding, uh, how do you kind of make time to keep that connection? Because you kind of focus on your vision. I'm kind of focused on my vision, and we always just it's a grind. And if you're an entrepreneur, you kind of understand that. But at one point, pretty much when I came home, I could always expect to see you at home.
Right.
When I was out there grinding on my earlier stages as an entrepreneur. But now, since you become an entrepreneur, I say, man, my wife works more than me. It's like I got to beg her for time now. But how do you balance that, especially now? You have two people that are entrepreneur. Our income totally relies on our business, and of course, once again, the bills are still coming in and stuff like that. And we want to also do things in life too as well. But just having two entrepreneurs in the household, how is that dynamic, and how can you balance that?
Back to organizing. You got to organize your time. You have to. So like even because I love to travel, so and I travel probably more than you do. But
I don't travel at all.
Right, but even in traveling, I know like, hey, I'm gonna travel and do this, and it has to be on a schedule. It has to be on there ahead of time. I can't just pop up and say I want to travel. Why? Because it requires money, it requires time, it requires planning. So even in the relationship, when you start thinking about balance, it's not all work and no play, right? So everything has to have its place. And so when you have two people who are entrepreneurs, two people who are working, two people who are looking and doing the things together, it's about partnership, right? And your partnership is really when you have no goals, you have no vision, right? And you can't do anything for the future together. So if you're doing you do you, and I do me, that's not what a partnership is or a marriage is. And so you have to think about, how can we spend some time together? One of the things that we do is we make sure that we spend time on either Friday or Saturday, right? Going to festivals or going out to eat, or let's watch this movie.
Yeah, we love to eat, y'all. We love to eat.
So
we love to
to
eat.
me, that's important. When I go to races, sometimes you come, like my marathon that whole weekend, you came out and supported me with that. So it's kind of like, again, what you put in is what you get out. And so when people find themselves having distress in their personal relationship with their spouse, they have to ask themselves, what have you put in? Because you will always reap what you sow. And so that's also an example of how you treat each other. How if I give you vinegar, guess what I'm going to get back? Vinegar, right? And so every word that I say is planting a seed, and vice versa. Every word that you say plants seeds. So you have to ask yourself, am I planting a garden, or am I planting weeds? And that's important in how you deal with each other on a regular basis. If no words are said, no words is kind of like water. So you're in the basement, I'm in the top part, but every now and then we still connect. Why? Because we pray, we eat lunch, But if no words are said, it's almost like watering, right? If you never speak to your partner in the way that they need to be watered, then guess what's going to happen? The plant's going to dry out. And that's life, right? And so you have to make sure that you're doing the things, again, that you want to see grow. You're planting the seeds that you want to see grow, and making sure that the seeds that you're planting are flowers and not weeds.
Great answer. Great answer. So kind of want to, as we get close to wrapping up here, kind of want to talk about a little bit about marriage, because like I said, throughout the entrepreneurship journey has been some challenges along the way that we didn't have. And one of the things that I attribute is, when people say, well, how y'all stuck together? Because of course, I have one daughter, Aaliyah. You have 4 sons we got together. And it was real young at the time. Too. Yes, she's stepmom too. Shout out to Aaliyah, shout out to Ishmael, Aaliyah. Shout out to Yusef, shout out to Idris, Adam, and Aya too, of course, the grandbaby. So shout out to everyone there. often tell people is that you have to have the mindset to stay in a marriage through the difficulty. Of course, one of the challenges, especially when you're in entrepreneurship, is trying to keep that family dynamic together. Uh, what do you think that kept us together as we went through certain phases? Like I said, I went through a phase where things got rough on me, especially after my mother passing, and I didn't know I was struggling with whatever I was struggling with. But so I kind of went through that rough patch, and then it came a time when you became an entrepreneur and things, but you're still going well for you was going well, and I was here, and we trying to wrestle with all that. And so what are some things, some advice that you would give for people that's kind of in that dynamic when things get rough? It's not the time to get out the marriage or break up the family, but what can you do to keep that family dynamic together?
Well, I would say there's 3 things that people can think about. Number 1, what's the goal? Like marriage, the goal is to build. So when you start thinking about being with a partner, number 1, building requires times when you're up and times when you're down, right? Times when structures and things might be torn down, but at the same time, the foundation is still the same, right? So what's the foundation of the relationship? That's super important. And if the foundation is we're going to do this regardless, then there is no getting out. That's one thing. There's no mindset in a marriage that I'm going to get out. If you already have the mindset like that, you're already defeating yourself. That's the first thing. So we're in it to win it. So when you use the term, people love to use the term ride or die. Really, it's not necessarily ride or die, because you want to be with someone who you can be beside them even through the mistakes that they make, right? And um, 2 people have to want to be in it together. They have to want to work together. They have to want to grow. And it may not look beautiful. It may not look beautiful. It might be that we're wanting to be together, but you make me sick right now, right? It might be that, yeah, you're struggling and things like that. And I just, I'm gonna let you struggle on your own or whatever, how people say things. But at the end of the day, you're still doing it together. And what's also most important is don't in the second thing I would say. So the first one is the foundation, wanting to work together, always, being on the same page. The second one is don't inject into the relationship your personal thinking of what you think the other person is thinking, experiencing, whatever. Speak to them about that. They can tell you how they feel. They can tell you how they're experiencing. But when you interject your own thinking from your past experiences, it's so detrimental to the relationship, because oftentimes you'll hear people say things like, you do this like so and so and so, or, like all women do this, or all men do this, and things like. When you use those exterior experiences inside of your current relationship, oftentimes it's not true. It's not true. So you have to be careful to be present in your relationship at any stage that they're in. Be present. So if you're being present, then it's kind of like, okay, you know what? That experience is what I experienced before, but it can't be the foundation of what you think in their current relationship. And you always have to be open, because you and that person are always constantly changing. And so the third thing is being amenable to change. Because no, you're not going to have Naima from 15 years ago. I'm not going to have Ortez from 15 years ago. You all are constantly changing. And hopefully, as you're changing, you're evolving to your better self. And so, again, when you see something that is not right, number 1, hold yourself accountable first before you mention it to the other person, because you don't ever want someone else to be something that you yourself are not, right? So hold yourself accountable, and then say, how can we work on this together? Because I see that you're struggling in this way. Because oftentimes when when you see the person struggling in a specific area, it's just an opportunity for you all to work together on it. It's not that this person only is the only one that needs to work on it. It's 2 people need to work together on it. And so what ends up happening is when 2 people are working together on one thing, we're both working on communication. We're both working on making sure our schedules work link up. We're both working on exercise and nutrition. We're both, when you're doing it together, then you feel not only the partnership, but you see how the other person is going to grow, instead of pointing the finger and demeaning other people by saying, no, you need to do this. No, we both are experiencing this at the same time. Why? Because we're connected. So to disconnect yourself from the person's struggle and or experience is a challenge, and you have to be willing to say, you know what, I can experience this with this person as well. They're having but I can be their support, right? It may not be my struggle, but I'm going to work with them, and we're going to work through this, as opposed to, no, this is the only thing that this is what you need to do. No, we need to do this together. And the togetherness is really what's going to bring the relationship forward. So again, the foundation, what is the foundation? We're going to be together regardless. Number two, making sure that you're sticking it all out, of course. What was the second? The number two is also making sure that the couple themselves, you are, huh?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, making sure the couple themselves that you're pushing forward and not using the past and old experiences to be the guide for where you are right now. And number three, of course, is every obstacle that you all are facing, you're always facing it together. Period.
Teamwork.
Teamwork.
That's right. So I know we got to wrap it up here because you got another obligation here. You always on the move.
Right.
And so I'm gonna wrap it up. So in 30 seconds or less here, I should say, or 60 seconds, I should say, where do you see yourself? And I asked my last guest this, where do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
Oh man. So in the next 10 years, I see myself having an extremely flourishing coaching community. Because my goal is really to reach 1,000 women and support them in their mental and emotional barriers, and to manage their saboteurs. It's super important, because if you can change your mindset, you can change your life, because what you believe is what you live. Your beliefs are tied to what you live. So anything that you believe, you're currently living that right now. And so if you want your life to change, you have to change your belief system. So 1,000 women. I'm also really invested in having a home overseas, living internationally, dragging you along with me, right? But
that's another conversation. That's a whole podcast.
Having a home internationally so that we can establish that for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren. That's super important to me. Being able to have the resources to support our Muslim community and how it grows. I'd love to be able to write a check for $100,000 and not blink, right? So that's one of my goals. And also to build a legacy of community service, a legacy of business and entrepreneurship, a legacy of spiritual development, a legacy of supporting family and making sure that family is grounded in the fundamentals of Islam. That's super important. So that's where I see myself in 10 years. And of course, us rocking the boat right on down into that future.
Yes. Well, I'd like to thank you for joining us today on Insure Your Success podcast.
Thank you so much.
Where can they find you at on social media and find your book? Because you recently released a book. So where can they find you at? How can people contact you? How can women contact you? No men, because she's,
right.
She's about helping women. But you can still buy the book though.
Yeah.
I have the book. I have the book. I read the book, and it's truly inspirational. But where can people find you at? How can they contact you? How can they find the book? Okay. Let the audience know.
So you can find me on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, at Lady Khadijah Institute. And personally, you can find me on all of the social media platforms as well: Naima Mwenda, or Haja Naima. And then you can purchase the book actually on Amazon. So 2 books actually. The first book that I wrote it was co-authored with 20 other coaches. We all went through a coaching program, got all our coaching certification through Hello 7 with Rachel Rogers, and we ended up writing a book called CEO Chronicles: Life Game Changing Action. So basically, it's a book that each coach wrote something, and at the end of it is an action plan. So You can definitely buy that book on Amazon. Again, CEO Chronicles. And then the second book that I wrote is called Stop Saying and Start Doing. It's all about what entrepreneurs, it's basically like 30 something sayings that I hear entrepreneurs say all the time, and which is a saboteur because it's an avoidance thing. They say these things, but they don't necessarily follow through and do it. So what that book does, it's a workbook, but it tells you the statistics on how many people say it, why they say it, how it affects entrepreneurs and business people, and then what they need to start doing and stop saying that. So stop saying that and start doing this. And action and momentum is what's going to get you the better results instead of the talk. So that again can be found on Amazon. Yep.
All right. All right. Well, once again, thank you for joining us
Thank you
on
for
this
having me.
podcast today. Make sure that y'all go out and like, subscribe, and share this information.
Yeah.
Because it definitely was some jewels.
Juicy.
It was juicy. Y'all probably thought we was gonna get talk about a whole bunch of drama, but nah, this ain't what this podcast is all about. It's about inspiring and lifting up African American entrepreneurs. So please go out and share this podcast with others. But until next time, thank you again, sweetheart, for being my guest. And until next time, we'll see y'all on the next episode.
And
Peace
ensure
out.
your success.
Ensure your success. Peace.